On a quiet Sunday morning in April of 2010, the peaceful town of Danvers, Massachusetts, was shaken to its core. Inside the walls of the Sacred Heart Catholic Church, a scene of horror unfolded that would leave the community reeling. A beloved local priest, Father Daniel McConnell, was found dead under mysterious circumstances, his body discovered in the church's confessional booth. The investigation would soon reveal an affair that no one saw coming, a scandalous relationship between a married woman, Sarah Quinn, and the very priest who was supposed to guide her. But as the truth came to light, so did something far darker, culminating in a murder that took place in the holiest of places. Sarah Quinn was a woman who once had everything she thought she needed. At 38 years old, she was a devoted mother to two children, Katie and Dylan, ages 12 and 9. Sarah's life seemed picture perfect from the outside. She lived in a comfortable house in a quiet neighborhood in Danvers, Massachusetts, a small town where everyone knew each other. Her husband, Michael, was a successful real estate agent who brought in a steady income, allowing Sarah to stay at home and take care of the children. However, behind closed doors, Sarah's life was not as fulfilling as it appeared. Michael had become more distant over the years. His long work hours and constant travel left Sarah feeling like she was more of a caretaker than a wife. She had tried to keep the marriage alive, cooking his favorite meals, planning family outings, and doing everything to maintain a warm household. But nothing worked. Michael, consumed by his career, seemed to care more about closing deals than spending time with his family. As the months passed, Sarah found herself battling feelings of loneliness. She loved her children dearly, but something was missing. The void grew larger with every passing day, and she didn't know where to turn. In January 2009, Sarah began attending the Sacred Heart Catholic Church regularly. She had always been a spiritual person, but it was during this time that she found herself seeking solace in her faith more than ever. The church, with its towering stained glass windows and the soft echoes of hymns during Mass, offered her a sense of peace that she couldn't find anywhere else. The priest of Sacred Heart, Father Daniel McConnell, was a well-respected figure in the community. At 42, he had served the parish for over 15 years, offering guidance and counsel to anyone in need. His kindness and dedication to his congregation had earned him a place in the hearts of many, including Sarah. Sarah first approached Father Daniel after a Sunday service in late January, seeking advice on how to handle the growing distance between her and Michael. They spoke in his office inside the rectory, where Sarah poured her heart out about her struggles at home. Father Daniel listened intently, offering her comfort through his calm and thoughtful words. He assured her that it was normal for marriages to go through rough patches, and he encouraged her to be patient and understanding with Michael. Sarah left the meeting feeling lighter, as if she had finally found someone who understood what she was going through. Over the following months, Sarah continued to seek counsel from Father Daniel. Their meetings became more frequent, though no one in the community thought much of it at the time. After all, Father Daniel was known for his deep compassion and willingness to help those in need. However, what began as spiritual guidance soon evolved into something deeper. By March 2009, their relationship had grown more intimate. Sarah found herself drawn to Father Daniel, not just because of his kind heart, but because he seemed to fill the emotional void in her life. He, too, found comfort in Sarah's presence, despite the conflict it stirred within him. He had taken a vow of celibacy, but over time, he struggled to keep his emotions in check. By the time spring rolled around, the affair had begun in full force. They would meet in secret at the church, exchanging stolen moments in the rectory when no one else was around. They wrote passionate letters to each other, each one filled with confessions of love and desire. Both Sarah and Father Daniel knew the consequences of their actions. She was a married woman, and he was a priest. But the emotional connection they shared was too powerful for either of them to resist. They had fallen deeply for each other, unable to turn back. As the months passed, the affair became increasingly dangerous. Sarah felt trapped between two worlds, her life as a mother and wife at home, and the intense passion she shared with Father Daniel. She loved her children, but her feelings for the priest consumed her thoughts. Every time she kissed her husband or held her children, guilt gnawed at her. But the pull towards Father Daniel was impossible to deny. Father Daniel, too, was conflicted. As a priest, his duties were to serve his parish and uphold his vows, but his love for Sarah had blurred the lines. He found himself struggling to maintain his composure during Mass, especially when he knew Sarah was sitting in the pews, watching him. He would spend hours in prayer, asking for strength, but the more he prayed, the weaker he felt. He had no one to confide in, no one who could understand the torment of loving a woman he could never truly be with. By July 2009, their secret was becoming harder to hide. Sarah's behavior had changed. She avoided social gatherings with her friends, always finding an excuse to stay home. She stopped confiding in her close friend Emma, who had noticed Sarah's withdrawal but didn't press her on it. At home, Michael sensed that something was wrong, but he attributed it to the pressures of motherhood and managing the household. He was too preoccupied with his career to look any deeper. Meanwhile, Father Daniel's erratic behavior raised suspicion in the parish. He was often seen leaving the church at odd hours, and his once passionate sermons had lost their spark. Parishioners began whispering among themselves, wondering what was happening to the man they had looked up to for so long. But no one dared question him directly. Unbeknownst to Sarah and Father Daniel, the church's groundskeeper, Tom Marlowe, had been watching them closely. Tom, a devout Catholic, had worked at Sacred Heart for over a decade. He had always been quiet and unassuming, spending his days tending to the church's gardens and cleaning the grounds. However, in late 2009, Tom began noticing the secretive meetings between Sarah and Father Daniel. At first, he dismissed them, thinking they were nothing more than counseling sessions. But as the months went on, Tom became suspicious. He had seen them exchange glances, and on more than one occasion, he had caught them entering the rectory together late at night. Tom was deeply troubled by what he suspected. As a man of faith, he believed in the sanctity of the priesthood and the importance of upholding moral values. He considered confronting Father Daniel, but ultimately decided against it. Instead, he kept his discovery to himself, hoping that whatever was happening would come to an end on its own. Little did he know, the secrets he harbored would soon unravel, leading to consequences far beyond what he could have imagined. The morning of April 2nd, 2010, started like any other for the parishioners of Sacred Heart Catholic Church. It was a Friday, and the early morning sun cast soft light through the stained glass windows, filling the church with a warm glow. The smell of incense still lingered from the previous evening's service, and the church stood silent, a sanctuary of peace for the faithful. At 7 a.m., one of the regular parishioners, an elderly woman named Eleanor Grady, arrived to say her morning prayers, as she had done every Friday for years. Eleanor, in her late 70s, was a devoted member of the congregation, known for her unwavering faith and commitment to the church. She moved slowly through the pews, clutching her rosary, her hands slightly trembling from age. As she approached the confessional booth, her usual spot for quiet reflection, something felt wrong. The stillness of the church was unnerving, and a metallic scent hung faintly in the air, almost unnoticed at first. It was only when she stepped closer that she saw it, the door to the confessional booth slightly ajar, something dark staining the carpet beneath. She hesitated for a moment, fear creeping into her heart, but curiosity pulled her closer. Her breath caught in her throat as she saw the lifeless body of Father Daniel McConnell slumped inside the booth, blood pooling beneath him. He had been struck violently in the head with a large metal crucifix, a symbol that had hung in the church for years, now stained with his blood. Eleanor stumbled back, her mind struggling to process the horror before her. Without hesitation, she ran out of the church and alerted a passing neighbor, who quickly called the police. Within minutes, the flashing lights of police cars lit up the quiet street outside Sacred Heart, the sound of sirens breaking the morning silence. The news of Father Daniel's murder spread quickly, sending shockwaves through the small town of Danvers. A murder in their church, committed in such a brutal way, it was unthinkable. The investigation into Father Daniel's murder began immediately, with seasoned detective Catherine Pierce assigned to the case. Pierce, a woman in her early 40s, was known for her sharp mind and relentless pursuit of the truth. She had solved numerous difficult cases in the past, but this one felt different. It wasn't just the brutality of the murder that troubled her, it was the setting. The church, a place of sanctuary and peace, had become the scene of a gruesome crime. On April 2nd, after surveying the scene, Pierce concluded that this was no random act of violence. The use of the crucifix as a murder weapon suggested that the killer was familiar with the church, and perhaps even with Father Daniel himself. The force of the blow indicated a deep-seated rage, and Pierce suspected that this was a crime of passion, possibly connected to Father Daniel's personal life. The first few days of the investigation focused on gathering evidence from the church. Forensics teams combed through the scene, collecting fingerprints, analyzing blood patterns, and photographing every inch of the confessional booth. The crucifix, which had been used to strike Father Daniel, was carefully bagged and taken to the lab for further analysis. But the evidence alone wasn't enough to point to a suspect. On April 4th, Sarah Quinn was brought in for questioning. Pierce had learned that Sarah, a married woman and regular parishioner, had been meeting with Father Daniel regularly for spiritual counseling. The detective suspected that Sarah's relationship with Father Daniel might have been more than just spiritual guidance. When asked about her relationship with the priest, Sarah initially denied any inappropriate involvement, but her nervousness was clear. Her hands trembled as she spoke, and she avoided eye contact, a clear sign to Pierce that she was hiding something. Over the next few days, the pressure mounted on Sarah. On April 10th, after hours of questioning, Sarah finally broke down and admitted to having an affair with Father Daniel. She revealed that their relationship had started over a year ago, born out of emotional need and the loneliness she felt in her marriage. However, despite her confession about the affair, Sarah maintained that she had nothing to do with Father Daniel's murder. She claimed that their last meeting had been days before his death, and she had no knowledge of what had happened to him in the church. With Sarah's confession, the investigation took a new direction. Detectives began looking into her husband, Michael Quinn. On the surface, Michael appeared to be a devoted husband and father, but Pierce learned that Michael had been growing suspicious of Sarah's behavior for months. Phone records revealed that in March, just weeks before the murder, Michael had hired a private investigator to follow Sarah. The investigator had gathered enough evidence to confirm the affair, and Michael had received the damning photos and text messages only days before Father Daniel's death. However, Michael had an alibi. On the night of April 1st, the evening before Father Daniel was murdered, Michael had been on a business trip in Boston. Hotel records and phone calls confirmed his presence there, leaving the detectives questioning whether he could have orchestrated the murder or if someone else had acted in a fit of rage. The investigation took another dramatic turn on April 15th, when Tom Marlowe, the church's groundskeeper, was brought in for questioning. Pierce had learned that Tom, a devout Catholic, had been working at Sacred Heart for over a decade. He had always been quiet and unassuming, but something about his behavior in the days following the murder raised suspicions. When questioned, Tom initially denied any involvement, but as the hours passed, his calm demeanor began to crack. He confessed to having watched Sarah and Father Daniel from afar, growing increasingly resentful of the priest for betraying his sacred vows. Tom had admired Father Daniel for years, seeing him as a man of great faith and moral integrity. But when he discovered the affair, that admiration turned to anger. Tom couldn't stand the thought of Father Daniel defiling the sanctity of the church, and he became consumed by his own twisted sense of justice. On the night of April 1st, Tom confronted Father Daniel in the church. The two men argued heatedly, and in a moment of uncontrollable rage, Tom grabbed the metal crucifix from the altar and struck Father Daniel with it, killing him instantly. The very object that symbolized faith and redemption became the instrument of his downfall. Tom's confession shocked the community even further. The man they had trusted to care for their beloved church had become the killer, driven by jealousy and rage. As Tom was taken into custody, the small town of Danvers was left grappling with the weight of the scandal, the betrayal, and the violence that had unfolded in their most sacred place. The trial of Tom Marlowe began on June 18, 2010, and it quickly became the talk of the entire town. Danvers, Massachusetts, was a place that had always prided itself on its strong sense of community and the quiet, peaceful lives of its residents. But now, everything had changed. The trial brought a darkness to the town that no one could escape. The story of Father Daniel McConnell's murder wasn't just about a crime. It was about betrayal, faith, and a deep sense of loss that left everyone questioning their beliefs. Tom Marlowe, once a trusted groundskeeper and a quiet figure in the background of church life, now found himself at the center of a public spectacle. In court, Tom appeared tired, worn down by the weight of what he had done. His life had once been simple, dedicated to the upkeep of the church and maintaining its gardens. He had taken pride in his work, believing that his efforts were a way to serve God and the community. But as the trial unfolded, a much more complicated side of Tom emerged. A man who had grown bitter and resentful, consumed by what he saw as Father Daniel's betrayal of the priesthood. The prosecution wasted no time in building their case against Tom. They portrayed him as a religious fanatic, someone who had become obsessed with the idea of purity and righteousness. They argued that Tom had taken it upon himself to punish Father Daniel for breaking his vows, and that his decision to use the metal crucifix as a murder weapon was a symbol of that twisted sense of justice. The prosecution painted a vivid picture of the night of the murder, describing how Tom had entered the church, confronted Father Daniel, and in a moment of uncontrollable rage, ended the priest's life. The defense, however, took a different approach. They argued that Tom had been driven to the edge, not by fanaticism, but by the actions of Father Daniel and Sarah Quinn. They claimed that Tom had looked up to Father Daniel as a spiritual leader and had been deeply hurt when he discovered the affair. To Tom, the affair between Sarah and Father Daniel wasn't just a betrayal of the priest's vows. It was a betrayal of the entire community. The defense painted Tom as a man who had been broken by the weight of that betrayal, a man whose anger had boiled over in a single tragic moment. As the trial went on through the summer, the town of Danvers became more divided. Some residents saw Tom as a villain, a man who had committed an unforgivable crime. Others, however, sympathized with him, believing that Father Daniel had brought his fate upon himself by breaking his vows and engaging in an affair with a married woman. The trial wasn't just about one man's guilt or innocence. It was about the moral fabric of the town and the sense of betrayal felt by everyone who had trusted Father Daniel. On September 10th, 2010, after weeks of testimony and deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict. Tom Marlowe was found guilty of second-degree murder. The sentence was 25 years in prison. The courtroom was silent as the verdict was read, the weight of the decision hanging over everyone present. Tom showed little emotion as he was led away, his once quiet life now shattered, with the next 2.5 decades to be spent behind bars. For the Quinn family, the fallout of the trial was nothing short of catastrophic. What had once been a stable, if somewhat ordinary life was shattered in the blink of an eye, leaving behind emotional wreckage that would never fully heal. Sarah and Michael's marriage, already strained by the weight of unspoken resentments and a growing emotional distance, crumbled under the intense pressure of public scandal. The affair between Sarah and Father Daniel had been a secret that Michael tried to bury, but when it was exposed during the murder investigation, it felt like the final blow to their already fragile relationship. Michael had initially tried to stand by Sarah, perhaps out of a sense of duty or a desperate hope to salvage their family. He had been determined to protect their children from the ugly truth, to shield them from the gossip that spread like wildfire through Danvers. But as the trial dragged on, it became clear that the shame of the affair and the shadow of the murder were too heavy for him to bear. Every whispered conversation in town, every sideways glance from neighbors, was a reminder of the betrayal that had torn his world apart. By early 2011, the couple had filed for divorce, their once happy home now irreparably broken. The love that had once defined their relationship was replaced by bitterness and a lingering sense of loss for the life they could never get back. For Sarah, the consequences of her choices were even more profound. Haunted by the events that had unfolded, she could no longer bear to stay in Danvers. a town where her name had become synonymous with scandal and tragedy. She left with her 2 children in tow, hoping to find solace in a new town, a fresh start where the past wouldn't follow her like a shadow. But no matter where she went, the memory of Father Daniel, once a man of God and the object of her forbidden love, loomed large in her mind. His death had shocked the town, but it had also shattered Sarah's sense of self. She couldn't escape the weight of her guilt, the knowledge that her actions had played a role in a series of events that led to his tragic end. The affair with Father Daniel, a man revered by the community and trusted by her family, had seemed like a brief respite from the monotony of her life. But it had spiraled into something far darker, something she could never have anticipated. In her new town, she was just another woman, another mother trying to rebuild a life for her children. But deep down, she knew she would always carry the burden of her past with her. People might not know her story there, but she would always be the woman who had fallen in love with a priest, a man whose death had destroyed her family and left an indelible mark on the town of Danvers. The community, once tight-knit, had also been shaken to its core by the scandal. Gossip about Sarah and Father Daniel became the stuff of legend, passed down as a cautionary tale for years to come. Parents would warn their children about the dangers of secrets, and churches in the area doubled down on their messages of morality and restraint. But for Sarah, the whispers never stopped, even in her new life. She could never completely rid herself of the reputation she had earned in Danvers. The affair with Father Daniel was not just a stain on her marriage, but a scar on her very identity. It's tragic, really, the way one choice can ripple outward, tearing apart lives in ways no one could have predicted. Sarah had been seeking something more, something beyond the confines of her mundane existence, but the price she paid was far greater than she ever imagined. The Quinn family, once whole, was now just another casualty of a scandal that had consumed their lives. Yet, as devastating as their story was, it pales in comparison to the case of the wife who had fallen in love with her father-in-law. A tale of betrayal that left even deeper wounds, and one that continues to captivate the public's morbid curiosity. In the end, stories like these serve as a reminder of the fragile nature of trust, love, and the human heart. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss out on our daily updates. More stories of love, scandal, and heartbreak are just a click away.